I have always found plumbers to be not, they have a good sense of humor, but at the same time, they're smart. They're smart.
You kind of have to have a good sense of humor because, I mean, how do you work on somebody's toilet and then, and then it feels like a proud moment? So you kind of have to be a little self-deprecating in order to say, but you know how much you paid me to do that? So it's kind of...
Yeah, but I mean, they're engineers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plumbers are engineers, man.
Absolutely.
Okay? I mean, a guy doing drywall's got a different mindset than a guy trying to figure out how to get a pipe from here to there, have it slope correctly with the space that you have, which is usually cluttered with other stuff.
Right.
And at the same time, technically know how to make something fit so that he's not coming back there again. Right. Because, look, a lot of these guys are crawling around in areas, like I was just talking about with the concrete, that they don't want to go back into.
Fix it like you'll never have to fix it again.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think a lot of tradesmen also do, they do their own projects. They don't, like a tradesman doesn't go to work all day with his hands and then go home and hire people to do things around his house. They do everything they need to do. And I enjoy those projects when they were different than what I did all day. And not to demean anybody else's trade, but a lot of the things I do at home, I'm like, yeah, that was good for 2 hours, but I can't even imagine doing that 40 hours a week.
Day.
It's
like tuck pointing.
Yeah.
I used to watch those guys going, and I saw this guy working yesterday. He's basically doing the same exact thing he's doing today, and tomorrow it's going to be, and I'd be like, you're going to go brain dead, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just the same thing. Yeah. It never changes.
Yeah.
Plumbing is different because plumbing's got its own challenges, especially in the commercial world.
Yes.
I mean, residential, it's probably got a little bit more in common, but commercial things, there's a lot going on. I mean, you could do. God, I remember when I first ran into A+. I think it was a job at 125 South Wacker where we were doing a bunch of bathrooms, but like a lot of them, and just to figuring out the mechanics of it, and then laying it out and all that. And then I remember one of my first jobs as a general contractor, because I was an architect first.
Okay.
Then I was a GC, and I still kept my architect's license, and I would do stuff on the side to pay off my student loans. But I was always fascinated that, okay, here's my drawing of where I want the toilets and stuff to go in the sinks and all this, and here's the water here and all that. And I give it to you, and you guys lay it out and put all your pipes up. Then somebody comes back and does a bunch of stuff, and you come back and put your fixtures in, and it fits. Right? It's like
absolutely
the margins for error are they're small.
And think about that if you're doing a big project and you're doing underground, and yeah, you might be able to put a floor drain in a vicinity of a 4-foot area. But when that toilet opening is there, it better be 18 inches from the sidewall and 12 inches from the back wall, or you're in a bad spot. You're going to be chopping concrete. Yeah. And you might not have anything within 60 feet to measure off of, but it better be right when it's done. And
well, those guys learn how they're better. Some plumbers are better carpenters than carpenters. Some. Yeah. Now, you don't want to give a carpenter a saw.
Right.
That's for sure. You don't want him knocking holes in walls. I mean a plumber. Carpenter, yes, but a plumber or an electrician, it's like, yeah, looks like the electrician made that opening. It's jagged. It looks like a jigsaw puzzle. But so anyway, what I wanted to talk to you though about was you're the guy. You're the owner of A+ Plumbing, right? And I don't even know if I know this. Did you start it or was it?
Yes.
Established before you got there?
Yes. 22 years ago. And literally, I grew up, when I started in the trade, it was, through an apprenticeship like everybody else. And I spent most of my career prior to being in business working large jobs. So we do a lot of jobs now where you're in there roughing in stuff and you might be there for a week or 2 weeks, and then you leave. As you said earlier, you leave, and then you come back and hang your fixtures.
And it fits.
And it fits. Then I would do projects where I was on the same job for a year. and you'd leave for a little bit and come back to do your trim. But that underground process was a month long.
A year?
Yep. Yeah. We did earlier in my career. Typically, as a foreman, we were doing anywhere from 3 to 10-story office buildings, or
Now, who was that with?
Concept Plumbing. They were out of Rosemont at the time, and they're currently in Palatine. Yeah, great people. I consider them like family, and learned a lot there.
So how old were you when you started? Were you right out of high school?
I went to college for 3 months.
Yeah.
And told my mother I'd give it a try, and I hated every minute of it because growing up, I mean, we all looked up to our fathers, and it was just that was what I wanted to do. That was what was going to get me the things in life that I wanted to have. So that was, you're going to go work hard, get dirty, work hard, and be rewarded.
But there's always that one guy who got you into it, right? I mean, you could have gone into another trade, right?
Well, it was.
It's not like you were like, I really like plumbing.
In high school, I wanted to be an electrician.
Oh yeah.
I had some classes in high school. We had a practical electricity class, and you tend to like things that you're good at. Well, they had a board set up with 6 1900 boxes.
I remember that. We had that same thing.
Yeah, and I had no problem thinking through three-way switches and whatever we had to do in those classes. I liked it. Yeah. But my opportunities were going to be with plumbing. My father was a plumber, my uncle, my grandfather. And so summers in high school, as soon as I could drive, my dad give me a life lesson. He didn't line it up for me. He said, you stop in the office and talk to the boss and see if you can get a job for the summer. I'm sure it was all prearranged by the time I got there. Yeah, I'm sure it was already, he knew I was coming and all of that. And, I was a kid from the suburbs, and grew up in Mount Prospect at that point. And shop was in River Forest, so I had to drive to River Forest. And
so you grew up in Mount Prospect. You go to Prospect High School?
Forest View.
It's right. It's not there anymore, right?
Yeah, correct. The buildings there are used for something else.
Yeah.
I think there's a college and a church. But early in my life, it was I grew up in North Lake until I got to junior high, and then moved to Mount Prospect at that point.
Okay.
But
so you liked electricity in high school, but you got out of that 3-month stint and you just walked into Concept. You started then.
I went through an apprenticeship at a company in River Forest where my dad worked, and then they went out of business. And then I had about a year at a company called Economy Mechanical. At the time, they were probably the biggest, or one of the top 3 biggest in the Chicago area, and they no longer exist. And then went to Concept from there.
So, what kind of apprenticeship program did they have?
From when I did it, it was 4 years. Now it's 5.
So you had to be at a certain pay rate for 4 years, and you couldn't do certain things for 4 years?
There wasn't really restrictions on what you could do.
It was just
it was just it was a structured pay thing. It was like a 6-month raise and a 1 year, and then you think. So the first 3 years, you'd go to school 1 day a week and get paid for that day.
Oh.
And then the last year was just all at work.
That's right.
And so I'm really proud of the system they have for that. It's 5 years now, but you get pretty well rounded at school. You get on jobs, you can get companies get specialized. So like if you came to work for A+ Plumbing now as an apprentice, you'd get a lot of experience in basically commercial remodeling, but you wouldn't get any experience doing residential repairs, or how systems are put together in homes. It's kind of a very different
you're probably not doing no lab work, nothing
Right.
hospital, nothing specialized like that.
Right. And we get little bits of hospital work at A+, but we don't get. There's a lot of the industry that we don't get. We don't get big underground jobs. We don't go after site utility stuff with water mains.
That's a different animal.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you kind of the schooling kind of gets you a different approach to these kind of things, and gets a little taste of things here and there.
Wow.
If you work for a good company, you get good experiences, and probably more important during your apprenticeship than how good the company is that you work for is how good are the guys that work around, or that you work around, because you can get abused. You can get guys that all they do is move stuff around in big jobs, and they're just basically a cheap mule.
Uh-huh.
And then you can get, but you can have, like, I had a great experience. The guys respected and liked my father, so they treated me well, and they were probably just good humans for the most part of the guys I worked for. So and then sometimes you just get to fall into good opportunities, and then probably for all of us, it's what do we make of the opportunities we get?
Yeah, I always thought that the relationship between the apprentice and the guy who he's apprenticing under, because I don't know if this is like this in plumbing, but when I was a carpenter, I was just working summers, for this carpentry company. The guy took me under his wing, gave me his tool belt. Now, you got to understand, for a kid just getting out of high school,
Yep.
times were different. We didn't have the internet. Right. Times were a little bit different. So things impressed you. The guy, I got this tool belt, and it was just old and broken in, and it smelled like just fresh cut wood, and it was just all the tools and nails were in there. And he's like, "Here, put this on." I was like, "Whoa!" And I walked around. I don't want to take the thing off, and I remember, but that guy, he had a relationship. I didn't know him, but he loved to teach me. He was an older guy, but he loved to teach about carpentry.
Right.
And he taught me a lot, and I learned a lot in that summer and then the next summer. And I imagine that with plumbing, it's the same thing. The best advice they could give you is never suck your thumb. But I mean, there's a lot to know.
Yes.
That you do. You can't just sit down and read a book and be like, okay, I could cut it now.
Yeah.
There's certain situations where you're like, no, this isn't going to work. This valve is never going to work in this situation. We need another type of valve, or there's a million other things that
One of the main things that I like to teach an apprentice, or like we bring guys in as helpers and let them dig ditches for the first 6 months, and if you can't. You have to have the wherewithal to do that with pride and with hard work and stuff, or you're not going to have it at the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a testing grounds before we're going to give somebody the opportunity to become an apprentice.
There's not a lot of guys that will stick that out.
Yeah, and one of the main things that I try is to anticipate the foreman's needs, or the plumber that you're working under's needs, because you can't really be a good plumber until you're a good apprentice. And if you know what my next move is,
right,
and if I can explain to that person, the apprentice, this is what I'm going to do next, and let them anticipate it. So before I say I'm going to need that piece of pipe or that fitting or whatever, if I'm up on a ladder, if they've already got it in their hand because they know that's what's coming next, thinking all the time.
I remember the exact same thing. And that was when I was a concrete cutter, and I was helping, other guys, and I was like, I really want to run that machine. It's really cool. But, I remember they would be saying the same thing. I don't want to have to wait for a hose. I don't want to have to wait for a fitting.
Exactly.
You should know what blade I need. Go and get it, have it ready.
Right.
I shouldn't have to be waiting for you, turn around and say, I need the 18-inch blade.
Right.
And I would have to, have the tools ready so that when you switch blades, I could crack the shaft, put a new blade on, so he's not wasting time.
Yep.
And that's a different mindset than I see a lot, not just in the office, but I guess in some of the trades in general, is that, your job as a beginner is important because you participate in the production of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Just like in the office, your job as a lower functioning, entry level position is key to the profitability of the project manager or, anybody that you're working for. It's really important. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a job.
It's hard for people coming into any industry to grasp all that, and it's part of how do you create value?
Right. That you create value by being valuable.
Yep.
Okay.
Being efficient, understanding the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the thing that strikes me, and it's not just in plumbing, but is that's lost. That's so lost in some people that it's just like, no, my job description says X, and if you're asking me to do Y, you're taking advantage of me. No.
It's the wrong person then.
But the world's loaded with them.
Yeah.
And,
that entry level for us before the apprenticeship, that's how we determine whether somebody's going to have a value at a higher level. Because if they can't create that value at a lower level, you might say, well, that guy's just digging ditches and hauling concrete slabs, whatever. But that's if he can't figure out how to be valuable at that level, he's probably not going to figure it out at a higher level.
Take some pride in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I remember as a construction, any trade I worked in concrete cutting, foundations, in carpentry. That's kind of how I came up. And for me, even at I was a laborer, just cleaned up houses for a couple of summers with my buddy Pat. And I remember me and Pat, his dad got us the job because he drove the roach coach around the development. And one day he was like, what are you guys doing this summer? We started doing this stuff. I was amazed. I was watching houses get built from a pile of dirt to foundations to framing it to doing all the finish work. Mm-hmm. It just fascinated me, and I would just sit there. And I was just responsible for cleaning up cutoffs and nails and basements and stuff. But for me, at the end, they would let me, like I said, the guy gave me his tool belt. He's like, here, we're going to frame this garage today. I was all in. But I bided my time. I wasn't saying this job is horrible, it smells, they're using me. I was like, wow, I get a check to work with my buddy and throw wood into dumpsters.
I always viewed those early ends and the paying your dues ends as, if I can be good at this, I'll get the chance to be good at that.
Yeah.
And it helped. You work. I don't know. At one point I had a move in my career, and my wife said, "How long are you going to be happy doing that?" And I said, "I don't know." She said, "Because you don't seem to be happy. You seem to always you're happy for a year. I don't remember if it's a year or 3 years or whatever. But if you don't ever seem to be happy at where you're at, you always seem to be wanting to get to the next level." I said, "I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, that's how it worked for me."
That's what keeps you moving. That's what keeps people alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, I remember the first wall I built. I still seared in my memory. The first wall. Okay?
That's amazing.
I built a freaking wall. It was like 16 feet long. It was 10 feet high. I remember where the jack studs go, and I framed out the window and the header, and I was so proud of myself. I remember tilting it up. And I just remember at lunch sitting there and I couldn't stop looking at it. And I
pride.
Yeah, because we're sitting there eating lunch on a 98-degree day, and I'm just sitting there and I'm eating lunch. I'm looking at that, and literally I remember that weekend going back there with my girlfriend and pointing out, like, see that? I did that. It's just awesome. Some stupid garage wall. Yeah,
but it's not stupid. It's not stupid. That was a big step at that point in your life. That was something to absolutely be proud of.
It's one thing to look. Not many people get to build stuff that they could point at.
Right.
There's very few.
Absolutely.
And I remember for me, one of my goals was, as an architect, is that I wanted to have a building on the skyline so that I could always be looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking I was the next, Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was gonna work at Skidmore, and I was gonna be a big designer, and and all that. But if you don't have something to point at, and you're not always aiming in that direction, everything else you let stop you. You let the headwind stop you. I could walk into a hurricane as long as I know the direction I'm going in is the right direction.
Right.
And so when I start talking to younger people or even my kids, and I said, look, it's very important to have an aim and to be always aiming at it. Mm-hmm. In archery, there's this thing, I didn't even know this. If you miss, if you hit your target, that's one thing. But if you miss, it's called sin. I didn't know that. I'm like, sin? Is that the origin of the word sin? I don't know if it is or if it isn't, but it's interesting that to miss your mark is a sin. And to in the Catholic religion or any religion, a sin is a bad thing.
Sure.
So there's this universal truth about a path, about an aim, about something that is, when you're working, being able to endure crap jobs, being able to endure walking knee deep and sloshing around in mud, which is what I did for a long time.
Yeah, me too.
Humping forms through mud
Right.
in the middle of winter. You're freezing. For some reason, the mud is not frozen. I don't know how that works, but you're sloshing around in this hole, but you have it in your head. It's for a reason.
Well, that's part of goals that whether it's conscious or subconscious, you're either you have short-term goals and you have long-term goals. So you were doing that so that you're sloshing through mud, carrying forms, so that you could get the foundation done, so you could get to the next stage. Well, individuals should always have those same short-term goals and long-term goals. Yeah. The jobs should always have it. They're guys.
Did you have it when you were at Concept? Like when you just started?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I had really good opportunities young. When I was an apprentice, the company I worked for was Gorin Smith Plumbing, and I got started. I'm the cheapest guy there, right? So literally, I'm going to be probably the last employee in a bad economy, right? They went from having about 20 plumbers to I think we got down to 4.
Oh, really?
And then things picked up again, and starting to build. And so each foreman had a big project they were working on, and the company got a 4-story remodel to do Halsted and Broadway.
Oh, this is like
no, I've got that wrong. Belmont and Broadway, and it was a 4-story remodel, and it was for a company called Carefree Vacations, and they were going to have offices on the bottom and the top and apartments in the middle. Now, I'm the only guy in the company left till they're going to start hiring. I think it was a 4th-year apprentice, the beginning of my 4th year of my apprenticeship, but I'm still an apprentice. Yeah, but I'm still an apprentice, right? And
that's the most valuable.
They're going to let me do it, and the estimator comes out from the office and gets me started, and I'm young. I still live at home at this point. Probably I'm 20 or 21 years old, so the estimator comes out and kind of gives me a little nudge in the right direction, and here's how you want to lay it out for your coring, and here's how you want to lay out your material. And
did you have anybody with you?
Not at the beginning, and
really?
as layout got finished and you're ready to start putting stuff together, I started by myself, and then they'd throw me a guy every once in a while to give me a hand, and then all of a sudden it was going to be moving. So I ended up with, I think I had 4 guys working for me there. But I could come home and sit at home and ask my father questions at dinner. And there was one that I tell often. And he, I got home and I said to my dad, we're pretty far into the project at this point. And I said, Dad, it really seems to take me way too long to put my plan together to what I want to do and how I want to lay it out. And I said, how do I know if it's too long? And he hesitated for a long time, and he said, let me ask you this. He says, when you finish your plan, do you have to adjust it or change it? I said, no, once I have my plan, I'm good to go. He said, yeah, then it didn't take too long.
Yeah,
I was going to say. He didn't even care how long it took. Just if it's one plan and then implementation, you were good to go.
Yeah, that's a good story.
But it got me that opportunity as an apprentice, and having that big of a project early on in my career was huge. But having guys around me that weren't trying to sabotage me and would take me under their wing and help me if I needed help or that kind of thing. Even the local inspector, he'd come up with some obscure thing that was a code that it was something that he could gig me on, and then he'd say, "But I see why you did it that way, and you're good."
Oh, really?
But it was like every time the inspector came out, it was like he knew I was young, and he was going to give me a little bit of a lesson each time I came out, but not treat me poorly.
No, that's
it was a big plus.
Remember that there was only there was the more and more I got into the commercial side, I realized that your relationship with the inspectors sometimes could be pivotal, because there was an inspector for north of the river, or east of the river, west of the river. There wasn't like 100 of them. There was enough of them where you would run into them again and again and again. So a lot of these guys would say, electricians for sure, would know these guys through hundreds of experiences, and that made them better electricians because they could. In general, the inspectors would have a relationship with the tradesmen where they weren't trying to hurt each other.
Right.
They were trying to help each other.
Right.
Now how that has changed with the with politics and with a little bit of just the way the times have changed, but that was something that I didn't know existed. That relationship, I was like, wow, what? How'd you do that?
Once I started on my own and started A+ Plumbing, you end up with, instead of just your job, you end up with a lot of jobs. So you get to know inspectors in a lot of different areas. And I had one inspector in particular in Schaumburg, Mike Boyd, that would when I had a question on another job on how would you handle this, this is a little different, I'd call him up. I'd leave a message at the office for him to call me. He'd call me about 4:30 when he got to his office, and I'd say, hey, just wanted to bounce an idea off you. And then we could talk about the pros and the cons of it. And I'd said, well, I was concerned about this, so I was going to go this direction, and I wouldn't guarantee me it would work in another town, but at least I could get a vantage point of an inspector.
No, but at least there's just some guy that's in your tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's it's not just an adversarial thing.
The one of the advantages of doing large projects is I could go start a hotel or go start an office building and have my first experience with the inspector and say, hey, just wondering if what is the thing that you find flawed in plumbing systems when guys come out all the time. There's always, every inspector's got his like one or two things that I hate when guys do this and they're supposed to do this and they'll cite a code and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, if you get that opportunity early on in the stage, I hate when guys do this. I just design my system around what he likes.
I remember when I was building a house, I bought my first house and I built the addition literally all by myself, except for I didn't pipe it and I didn't put the bricks on, but I did everything else. I didn't do the plumbing. But when I was helping the guy with the plumbing, he was, got it inspected. And I remember the inspector was telling us about, you need a hanger here, you need to protect this from rattling there. And I was like, this is stupid. When are you writing that up? You write that up? What's wrong with you? And I was arrogant. Mm-hmm. And the guy wrote like a book of, violations. And I was a real jerk about it. And I argued with him. And
that's why you got the book version.
He threw the book at me, and I deserved it. I had it coming. But later on, I remember I did another renovation, and same guy comes out. And I'm like, I am not messing with this guy, So he remembered me. He goes, you know why I wanted this done? He goes, I can't stand water hammer. I can't stand the banging. I got it in my house. It just drives me nuts. I just wanted you to know that's why I didn't want you to have that experience. That's why I just told you, put a bracket here and do it this way. And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, God, I'm such a jerk. I thought he was trying to do a power play. The guy was just trying to help.
Right.
But young and dumb,
Well, sometimes we all get caught up in you're doing this project while you're still trying to do a full-time job and be part of your family and all the rest of the things in life. So it's like, okay, this inspector comes out. You really need this to be done now.
Right.
You don't need to spend another 8 hours on it and start the process over and wait for an inspector again.
Just want to close the wall up.
Yep.
I just want it up.
So like all of the pressures come into your reaction to what situation.
Because you're immediately thinking, that's an hour. That's another hour.
Yeah.
That's going to take me all day. I know I can't find that.
I don't have that time. Mm-hmm. And so it all comes into it. And we all get caught up in those.
So when you started A+, though, did you just decide, hey, I'm going to start a plumbing company?
I had a really good job at Concept. I had spent about 3 years as superintendent there, and then asked to do a project at Northwestern. We were doing
in Evanston?
always lab work I loved doing. I did a bunch of lab work as a foreman at Abbott Laboratories.
Oh, yeah.
So this was a 2-year project where it got to include some things that normally a plumber and a foreman superintendents don't even get to do, in that I got to design the systems and go to meetings with the engineer. And it wasn't just designing the plumbing system. It was dimensioned and elevations to fit in and coordinate with the piping trades and sheet metal.
You guys have the cool stuff like the glass P-traps and all that?
We did that at Abbott, and this particular one was more the plastic acid waste systems. But it was a 2-year project. I think I spent either 2 or 3 months just at the design end of this thing.
Really?
And it was a fabulous project that I was very proud of when it was done. But in the back of my mind, there was always my father was a very good tradesman, very respected. And I remembered he would tell me stories and say he wondered what if he had decided to go into business. And it was, I just got it in my head that I didn't want to say what if, that if I tried and it didn't work out, that's okay too. But I didn't want to wake up and say what if. So literally when I started it, my boss took he took the high road. He encouraged me, helped me, told me it was an admirable thing to do, even though I was leaving his company in the process. And it was me in a van and some tools. And I spent the...
It's always a guy in a van with tools.
Yep. Yeah, I walked the neighborhood. It was bitter cold. I walked my neighborhood stuffing mailboxes with flyers, that I do water heaters and sump pumps and stuff like that. And I just said, I'm going to see where this takes me. Now, I knew a lot of people in the commercial end, so word gets out, and the next thing you know, you got a guy's account. And I had a couple. John Schubot with JRS Construction was my first real account, and it was we were doing about $50,000 a year for him, and that was a really good starting point for a guy with a van.
Yeah,
and that was just doing tenant improvement work, so it was just doing sink packages, kitchen sinks and water heaters, and it was just a good kind of foundation to get things started on.
So it's just you in your van, driving downtown, throwing sinks in these TI jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when did it start, getting bigger? Did you when did you decide to get an office?
Let me start with this. At some point when you decide to hire somebody, you have to accept the fact that you're going to feed them first.
Oh my God, please. I remember that day.
You feed their family before you feed your family.
I remember that day clearly. I didn't sleep for a long time.
And then you have to have enough capital built up that you can say, I'm going to pay him, and usually his material is pretty close to the same value as his labor. So I'm going to pay for the material and pay for him for a month before I can even send a bill out. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to wait for 2 or 3 months before I get paid from that. So at that time, 20 years ago, I thought, okay, I got to have about $30,000 in the bank to hire one guy. And at that time, you couldn't get help, but I could get all the work in the world.
So when is this, 90s, 80s?
90s. Yeah, 90s.
Right before the dot-com bust, or before that? Right?
Things were before that. Things were booming pretty good. God, I used to know what year we started.
You don't know what year you incorporated, Aaron?
But it kind of built from there. So
I remember that mindset, though. I remember it because when I started off, the company, I had clients. I remember doing the math just like you did in your head. Mm-hmm. And then at some point I needed to hire somebody, and it was Marissa. And I remember thinking, do I have enough money? I remember going through the mental gymnastics of, okay, if we don't get another job from today until for a year from now, do I have enough to keep her check from bouncing? And that was my biggest thing was I remember the weight of that, right. Of thinking,
you're making a promise.
It's her job now. Someone's working for me.
Yeah. She's counting on you.
Yeah.
And you're counting on her, but she's also counting on you to provide that.
I wasn't prepared for that. I was not prepared for that mental gymnastics that goes on with that. I'm better at it now, but it's 10 years. But
So I went a year with just me. And I could get, if I get a little surge of work, I could get guys to come and help me on side jobs on the weekend, and that got me through some of those little surges of the first year. Second year, it was buy another van and put another set of another setup on the street, and then it kind of took off from there. I think it was about year 5 when we kind of had a boom where we ended up adding 4 or 6 guys, and we started to get a reputation as a good place to work. I had a kind of a screaming match with one of the union officials. I'm a union guy, still a union member, but I'm frustrated at this point. I've got clients that need jobs done, and I can't get help. And I've signed a contract saying I can only use their guys, but they can't provide them for me.
Yeah.
And I'm frustrated, and I've waited for a long time, and I'm on the phone and would shake his hand right now. He's a friend now. But I said, look, so I'm obligated to use your guys, and you're not obligated to give me any. I said, should I go to construction sites and try to pirate guys from other guys? He said, well, you wouldn't like that if you did that, if the outcome of that. No. and ultimately it made him think hard about getting me some guys, and he got me 2 guys, and those 2 guys were with me for a long time. And we got a reputation as a good place to work, that you were respected. One, the type of work we do, so you're not in the mud, and you're not out in the cold.
You're clean and dry,
and you're not in the heat. Yeah. So there's some parts that aren't so much fun, is that the downtown jobs aren't next to your house, and some guys want to leave a good job so that they can go work 5 minutes from their house, and that works out for them. That's fine. It's their decision. Mm-hmm. But it kind of just took off from there.
Yeah, and then you guys, I remember. So I wanted to ask you about the name.
Oh,
is it just a phone book thing? Did you want to be the first in a phone book? What is the deal?
No, it was literally intended to be. To be honest, it started from when I was just doing side jobs to make some extra money, and it was a play between my name, Aaron,
right,
and A+ a grade in school.
So it's like Aaron and Friends. But the plus sign means and friends.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that at all. It was. It's better to be an A+ than a D- in school.
Yeah.
So that literally the most of it was the play on
exceptional
on the school and on being the best grade possible.
Yeah.
That was mostly what it was. And then it was kind of neat because my oldest daughter, who was very young at the time, when it basically was the side job thing, computers in houses were just starting to be popular. And my mother-in-law had a computer, and my daughter, who I'm going to guess was 6 or 7 years old, is playing on the computer. And we're coming up with a font to use for a business card, and ultimately we're designing my first business card. Mm-hmm. And they made an A+ sign that would be like a teacher would put on the top of a paper.
Yeah.
And then she took a balloon logo and spun it upside down and made it into a drip of water off of the plus sign. So that was kind of the very beginning.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question about getting an office, I think we were in business for around 5 or 6 years. And literally it started in my dining room. Never had a dining room table. Started a card chair and a table in my dining room and a little file box. Actually, it wasn't a file box. It was a milk crate used as a file box. And then we got a desk and then outgrew that. And ultimately, when my wife got more involved, it became more of a full-time job for her instead of just helping me when I needed help. It turned into our living room and dining room. And so it was literally taking over the house. And that was all just to keep the overhead low.
Yeah.
I never wanted to pay rent. So that was kind of one of the things that drove that. So we kind of realized, that's actually a funny story. Came home from dinner at, 11 o'clock at night out with people and stuff like that. And I walk in my house, and because it's my living room and my dining room, we had some nice furniture set up in there because she said if it's going to take over the house, at least it needs to look nice. and I look over, and the answering machine is flashing that there's a message on the answering machine. And I not smart enough to walk away, I go over and I hit the button to see what the recording is. And it's somebody complaining about something they shouldn't be complaining about at whatever time they left the message. And just realized that this thing has consumed my life and I don't have any time away from it. And that home isn't someplace to go away from work. It's a place that I go back to do my paperwork.
Yeah.
And I was probably still at the point where I was working all day with tools. It might have been shortly after that, and then coming home and doing paperwork. But I lost it when I listened to that message, and I said, this has got to leave the house. There's got to be some kind of separation between your work and your life. And maybe that's when we started looking for an office to go to, and we bought a 3,000 square foot industrial space.
It was like out in Elk Grove somewhere?
In Schaumburg.
Schaumburg?
Yeah.
I remember that day too. I remember I was working out of my basement for a while, and my kids were young.
Yep.
I had 3 kids, and the noise that gets generated from toddlers isn't like any other noise from any other human being. Somehow they've developed the ability to transcend any sound barrier when you're on the phone.
Right.
So, in my business is a lot of on the phone. So there's a lot of conference calls. There's a lot of things that you do on the phone. And so when people would call me, they're thinking they're calling my office, and they're hearing dogs barking and kids crying, and it just at the right moment, it'll be perfectly quiet, and then it'll be this huge. So I remember one day I got off this conference call. I'm like, I'm out of here. And I, went and got an office. But I remember that day, it was hilarious because I was just like,
at some point there, we each get to a point where you're trying to be efficient, and you grasp the fact that a need for professionalism is going to outdo the need for the efficiency. And yeah, you could have stayed in your basement. And I know I worked for a lot of guys that worked out of their house their entire career as a general contractor, and were very successful and did great. But at some point, if it's not working for you anymore,
I needed the separation. Yeah. I needed to be away in a different space.
Yeah.
I also, needed to be downtown, so all my work was down there. And but I remember, as being that, a couple of years when I was basically just me, and thank God for the help of strangers and friends. But I mean, I remember it was this one time when it's like no part of your life was considered off limits for your clients.
Correct.
And I remember it was this one day I had this meeting, I had it all planned out, but I had to go to the eye doctor. When I was at the eye doctor, he discovered, I had a hole in my retina. So he wanted to look a little bit closer. So he wanted to dilate your eyes just a little bit more than they should be. And it was in the morning, and I had this meeting in the, about 4 or 5 o'clock. And so I'm on the phone, and I was trying to type. I don't know if you ever tried to do anything with dilated eyes, but I was like, there's no getting out of it. I don't have a secretary. I can't ask anybody else to do this for me. I'm typing up this proposal, and literally I don't know what I'm typing. I'm just like hoping by muscle memory. And so I send it out, and this guy calls me back, and he's like, do you know how to spell? And I'm like, I didn't want to say to him, I am blind. I have, my eyes are as big as like saucers right now. My pupils are dilated 100%. And I just remember just being like, yeah, that's misspelled. And then you're like, try to get as far away as you can to type it. And, but I remember thinking of that moment and thinking that there was this sense that it's all me. Yeah. I have no other resources. There's nobody working for me.
You wear every hat in the company.
Yeah. And I really liked it because, just you talk about like the logo. I remember spending the entire day designing my logo, like just agonizing over, is this angle correct? And I want that to look, what about the color? And, and finally I couldn't decide on a color. So I asked my wife, what's your favorite color? I like orange. Boom, done.
We're going to stop thinking about this.
I just thought about this for about 2 hours, and I'm done. It's going to be lunch. But it's just funny how some of these things happen.
I didn't understand things like branding and that the logo was going to be that important because it was going to follow you forever, and all of those things weren't part of my thought process early on, because a lot of tradespeople they become how do I put this? The tradespeople transition to become businessmen, and some are better at that transition than others. Some run their businesses as a tradesman, and some become professional businessmen.
Yeah.
And we're probably all somewhere in the middle.
There's some guys who just never stop turning a wrench.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, they can't let go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at some point, if your business is going to evolve, you have to stop being a control freak.
I remember being very aware of that.
Yeah.
That there's no way that I could be both.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I loved being a carpenter. I loved being an architect, but I loved doing both at the same time. So I was like, this general contracting thing came up, and I was like, that kind of is both. This is great.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do this forever. But I always considered myself an architect who was building things. And as a general contractor, that's how I approach it. I always approach it with the architectural mindset, which is more of the business end of the spectrum of the industry, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, carpenters, plumbers, electricians, tin knockers, all these guys have to first be good at what they're doing, which is technical. Mm-hmm. That's got nothing to do with making a buck.
Nope.
It's nothing. It's about preventing this thing from leaking. It's about where do you put this thing. It's about sizing this correctly. It's about that's technical stuff.
Right.
That's what I had. I had a podcast with this this guy who really just studies the psychological end of working, right? And basically, long and short of it is, your brain produces dopamine when you do something that you like. Mm-hmm. Same thing that leads to attraction between two people. It's the same thing that makes Tiger Woods swing the club 10,000 times when he's got a broken whatever, right? The guy won a tournament on a broken leg.
Broken leg, yeah. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Not many people would go to work with a broken leg. Right? Or you know what I'm saying? So there's a reason for that, and the reason is he gets such a joy out of doing it that doing it is most important. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's working. For me, it's drawing. For me, it's solving a problem, putting a team together, getting a project done right. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you're talking about is true. It's like I think that technicians, plumbers, are in that group, are like that. They like putting stuff together. They like making it work. And that's what gives them their dopamine.
Just like when you took your girlfriend back to see the wall you built.
Yeah.
What feeling did that give you when you built that wall?
Dopamine's flowing.
I always felt that part of a work day as a tradesman, the very end of it, is after cleanup, and this is all your stuff put away and is your area cleaned up. It's that admiration moment. You get to stand back and look at what you accomplished.
Studs Terkel wrote a book called Working, and in that book, I remember reading it, and a lot of that goes through the theme of the book. It's just interviews with a bunch of guys, and but it's that something to point to thing that we all have. Right. We all need something to point to.
Right.
And that's why I laugh about accountants. I'm like, what are you pointing at? You're pointing at a spreadsheet. I'm pointing at something that will stay there for a long time, hopefully, and stay up. Yeah. And I can look at it, and I know every in and out of the thing that I built, and it gives you pride.
That interest you had in building something on a skyscraper or something on the Magna Mile or wherever that was going to end up getting built. Yeah. I do remember walking up and down the Magna Mile with my wife, and we don't spend a lot of time downtown. And we were down there for like an anniversary or something, and we walked up one side and down the other of the Magna Mile, and she stopped.
I know exactly what you're going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say. I worked in that building. I did that building. I did that building. You know what I did in that building?
Exactly.
Yeah. I've done the same thing many times to my wife. Unfortunately, my wife likes to spend more than her share of time on Michigan Avenue. But I remember that specific moment. It's a great source of pride for everybody.
For me, it turned that moment into, maybe being a little more self-aware in that I always just viewed myself as a little guy that nobody noticed in the industry.
Yeah.
And even in business, it was it was just we're certainly not one of the movers and shakers of the industry. But at some point we grew into something that a lot of people know, and a lot of people see the trucks and they
when you
understand
look
who
back
we
on
are.
it now, if when you were at Concept, if somebody would have told you you're going to have these many trucks, these many employees, your payroll is going to be this big, you would have laughed at them.
I'm really proud of the fact that I believe 2 years ago we did almost $8 million in work, and that's staggering to me. It's like almost incomprehensible.
You know what's really weird? When I thought about it in terms of how many people that I employ, how many people. First of all, it does give you panic attacks at night, but secondly, it gives you a lot of pride, right?
Yeah.
And that so you're thinking. You listen to stuff on TV about the jobs report and so many jobs were created. I'm like, 5 of those are mine.
yeah. And one of the things that we got to have pride with, and pride with all of them, but I'm not going to have the right count here, but in our family, we brought up a lot of guys into the industry. And one of them left high school, and the very first day out of high school, he was with me. And it's the only place he's worked. I mean, aside from kids' jobs in high school, but he wanted to work for me from day one.
Yeah.
The rest of them...
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of that. And then the rest of them went and tried to do other things, including my 2 sons, is they tried to go do other things, and then they ended up coming in that it was going to be a good place to work, a good place to have a career, you'll end up making enough money to have a decent lifestyle, that kind of thing. So it's very rewarding when I see my sons and my nephews doing well.
And you know what also should be rewarding? People like to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I know that and I'm still I'm still a project manager. I run my share of work, but not as much as I do more other things now. But and I'm sure you know how that process is. But
Absolutely.
There's other people in the industry where they have handed the company off to their kids, and it's not the same person. And you're like, God, what happened? This company used to be my go-to. Now this guy's screaming at me, and I'm like, his father would kill him if he knew that this was going on. And so it's a compliment not only to raise your kids so that it's hard. I don't care if it was an apprentice or whatever it was, to get them to behave so that the business didn't lose anything.
Yep. In
fact, it may have gained.
Yep.
That's a huge compliment, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
I do feel that process of handing that off was the hardest thing I've done in my career, and I'm very proud of the way it came out. So what were you thinking? We're like, I'm just going to ease on into this? Well, I had a very structured plan with that. Now, I brought them, they all learned the industry through me, from the tradesman aspect to coming into the office with the 3 that are in the office. So they were already running things. Now, it didn't go from everything on me to now they're taking over. In the process of them becoming project managers and estimators and superintendent, they had their clients. They had the clients that they transitioned from me, and all of those are challenging. Like you said, the comfort level of that person that used to be dealing with me.
I still
and
call
dealing
you,
with them.
Aaron. I still call you.
Yeah.
Right. I'll get a job. I'd be like, Aaron. And I know in the back of your head, you're like, dude, I'm not working there anymore.
Well, I had answers for that for everybody. It's like, well, let me see what I can do to help you, and then I'll have Nick call you, or I'll have Michael call you and stuff. And I would start the process for them to give the client the comfort level they needed, and that was the reason they called me. But I let my guys have the solution to the problem when that happened.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, here's what happens, and I'm sure this happens not just with me, but with other guys. It's like, I'm building this lab. What kind of pipe do we use for this? Because we needed a certain situation where it couldn't be a glass pipe. It had to withstand the lab conditions that were. And I know who was the plumber I was working on. It was A+. I'm going to call Aaron. and I'll call you up. Yeah, we use this, and that. Oh, okay. Hey, here's a set of drawings. We're building this out.
Yeah.
Take care of it. And then, I'll have Nick call you, or,
Yeah. So like once they were, I didn't even think about transitioning away from it until they were competent in those things. And maybe that's a mistake some people make is they try to start those processes too soon.
Sometimes it's out of your hands, too.
So everything evolved. And I had guys in place that I didn't put them in place for that. They just happened to develop the abilities and work into that. So at some point I've got Michael and Nick in the office, and they're their own estimators and project managers. And when we started thinking of the transition, it became real easy. It's okay, you do your projects, I'll do my projects. Well, I'm going to start bidding less. And if I start bidding less,
you're going to start bidding more.
It was more of a, I need to stop having jobs that I'm running, because it's hard for another individual to take over your project mid-ship.
It's almost impossible. It's not,
because nobody
can be
knows,
done. It's just going to be bad.
Nobody knows as much about that project as you do. So it was just a matter of me starting to do less and focus on other things and get to the point where I think it took me 6 months, where it took me 6 months to stop estimating. And then the jobs I was still getting, it took me another 6 months to kind of finish them. And I'll say it was, so we're in 19 now. So in 2018, I started that process in my head and didn't discuss it with them. I just kind of made that happen. And by the time we got to the end of last year, I didn't have a whole lot to do in the office. So I'm pretty much just going out looking at projects. So I was still doing the walkthroughs and still going and shaking hands and trying to get a little FaceTime with people. So at the beginning of this year, that was supposed to be my walk away. January 1st, I'm going to walk away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So so it was January 1st, supposed to be
I'm still calling you on January 2nd.
Formally retirement.
Yeah.
And it was, they had already been running things. So I made myself available. And then, my deal with the boys was, if 2019 goes the way it's supposed to, January 1st, they buy it.
Yeah, in 2020 is supposed to be killer too. I mean,
hope so.
There's no slowing it down from what I can see. So they'll be off on a good footing.
Yeah, this year I got asked. So if I retire January 1st, somebody asked me in May. I'm just going to guess the date. Somebody asked me in May. So how many times have you been to the office? And I said 3.
Oh God!
I said once I went in to steal some stuff for a project at home, and once I, Nick asked me to stop in to look at a set of drawings. He just wanted to bounce some ideas off me, get his comfort level up on it. He was spot on in what he was thinking. And I said, and the third time, just to see my grand dog.
Your grand dog.
I just went to see the dog.
That's awesome. Good. Well, that's the way it should be. I mean, it's a success story if you
absolutely
all the way around.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm hoping that I could, get close to something like that. I still got some ways to go, but I got to tell you, your presence in the industry, I felt it. I know a lot of people do, and sorry to see you walk away from it, but we know I still have your cell phone number, so I don't care.
Very appreciated. As you know, I'll pick it up anytime. And if I don't pick it up, I'll call you back shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
So,
but we got to have you back out. I'm going to have you back out on the podcast in a little bit too. I want to see. I'm interested in discussing a little bit more technical stuff, and it's hard to do in one session. Otherwise, it becomes 4 hours.
This has been fun. I didn't come back anytime. I enjoyed this.
Well, listen, thanks for coming. I appreciate it, and good luck in 2020.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Like I said, I think what's going to happen is 2020 is going to just be gangbusters. I think it's going to be better than 2019. I really do.
Be interesting.
So all right. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.